It's all in.
It's hot in here, by the way.
One of your mentors, Mr. Tim Cook, what's one of the things that he's said that stuck with you?
That weird decision that he made was one of the reasons that Steve Jobs ended up taking an interest in him as a candidate to come to Apple.
I walked into Times Square to see a billboard with my book and my face on it. Hundreds of people, sold out crowd. I went home that night. I was in the worst panic, anxiety, stress, fear that I've experienced in my life.
Excellence is your capacity to take pain, transmuting that pain into progress. Like, what do you do?
I learned this from a friend of mine, Alex Hormozi.
Okay, Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for being here. So I want to start like how I was introduced to you, and it was actually your newsletter was forwarded on to me, Curiosity Chronicles. If no one's on it, then go subscribe. I've made it a habit to read every letter since, because I think what's different about you, I feel in particular, is the mastery in your writing is evident, and it shows in your book as well, which we'll touch on shortly. And I think the best thing about writers such as yourself is you can communicate and express ideas really clearly, which hopefully we'll get across in this episode. But for anyone that doesn't know you, please introduce yourself.
I never really know how to introduce myself. So first off, thank you for having me. Appreciate this. And I know we've been trying to coordinate it for a while, so I'm glad we were able to make it work. I suppose I can now say that I'm an author. My first book was just published. For a while, I really struggled with identifying exactly who I was or what I did. One of the things that's challenging actually with going down a different path, becoming an entrepreneur, doing something different, is that you don't have that little like bite-sized thing that you can say to people. So you go to like a party and people say, "What do you do?" You don't have the one line that you can say. When you're on like a stable, normal job track, corporate track, it's very easy to do that. So like, I don't know. I would say I'm a writer. I would say I'm a content creator and an investor, an entrepreneur, I suppose. But that just feels like too many different things. So now I'm just going to say author.
Okay, perfect. Multipreneur. So obviously we're here at Sauna and Plunge in London because we met actually a year ago at yours and Ali Abdal's event. And, to your credit, you stuck to your promise, because there's something you said in the event that stuck with me. Literally one line, you said, "Closed mouths don't get fed." And I had the idea of the show like a month ago, and I pitched you at the end, and like I said, like we've coordinated it now. So again, thank you for being here.
That's you though. You followed up. Yeah. Most people, this is one of the funny things. Like I get, a lot of people reach out to me asking me to do different things with them or shows. And one of my like rules is that the first time people ask, I almost always say like, "I can't do it right now, follow up in a month or two," just because I always have too many things on my plate. And 99% of people never follow up.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. It's like there's a filtering mechanism right there. If you're just willing to care enough to set a reminder to follow up, you already are in rare air in your life. And it's like there's a principle for life there that like you can get pretty damn far in life by just being someone who cares. So few people care enough to go that tiny little extra mile, to do that little bit of extra effort, the little bit of attitude, the little bit of energy to put towards the thing. And if you just do that, you already stand out.
It's true. I just listened to a Founders podcast episode. He literally said in there, it's about Walt Disney, said if we lose the detail, then we lose everything. Like so few people care. So it's true.
I thought these were supposed to be cold plunges.
Something like that. It's all in. This guy's showing me up already.
How are we feeling?
So good.
Just breathe into it.
So good. So one of your mentors and good friends is, Mr. Tim Cook. What's one of the things that he's said that stuck with you?
I think to lean into your pattern interrupts, meaning the things that make you unique and different, rather than trying to avoid them or run away from them, lean into those things. He had a very interesting journey in that he left a very stable, safe track, working in the kind of rising through the ranks at IBM, this big company, to go and join this computer startup called Compaq. And it turned out that weird decision that he made was one of the reasons that Steve Jobs ended up taking an interest in him as a candidate to come to Apple, because it was this big company guy that for all reasons would have stayed on that track, but then made this decision to go and lean into a pattern interrupt and do something different. And so when I was going and making the decision to step off the track I was on and go think about doing something different, he was one of the people that sort of gave me permission, like encouraged me to go and do it, to lean into this thing that just seemed different, that I clearly had energy around. Like most of your young life is spent trying to fit in, trying to like understand where you fit into the world. And the funny thing about life is you end up getting rewarded for being different as an adult. And so it's like the thing that you were most afraid of as a kid ends up being the thing that you get rewarded for when you're an adult.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, there's a quote it reminds me of is that the place I will fit does not exist yet because I have to create it.
That's a great quote.
Yeah,
I love that.
Completely agree. You're big on health and performance maxing and whatnot. So what's your process of filtering? Because I feel like the danger now is of over-engineering a routine or in general having an abundance of information. What's your process of filtering information?
I really look for asymmetries in life. And what I mean by that is I look for things where 1 unit of input creates 10 plus units of output in my life. And that's a really important principle, finding those asymmetries, because what that allows you to do then is deploy the same 1 unit of energy, but have way outsized impact of that energy deployed. And so when I'm creating a routine or any structure to my life, what I'm looking for is what are the things that are actually creating those asymmetric outputs and what are the things that aren't. And that requires testing. You actually have to experience the thing and see if it still fits and if it's doing something positive in your life. And if it is, you keep it. And if it's not, you have to be really fast about getting rid of it and scrubbing it. That applies to routine things. It also applies to people.
Right.
If you're spending time with someone and they're draining your energy or they're making you feel physically not great after you spend time with them, you have to be quick about removing that person's energy from your life. On the flip side, if the person is lifting you up, if you spend time with someone and they're making you feel like you want to go run a marathon after spending time with them, you're so excited, that's probably an asymmetric relationship, something that you should lean into.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's true. With people, I feel like filtering is such a important thing. And we'll talk about the brain trust, I think, that you spoke about in your book a bit later on. But what are some of the asymmetries that stand out to you that you think about, that you've experimented with, whether it's in your business or in your health? What are some of the asymmetries that stand out to you?
I have found cold plunging to be a very asymmetric activity because it takes me 5 minutes to do in the morning, and the impact that I get over the course of the several hours that follow is dramatic. Just in terms of the energy impact it has, feeling like a winner, feeling like a badass from doing something hard to start the day, and the ripple effect that has over the coming hours. The health impact, I actually have no idea if it'll end up being proven out by science over the long term. I view that as upside to the mental impact that I feel like I get, the cognitive boost and the dopamine hit that I definitely get from it. So that's been one that's been highly asymmetric for me. Sauna in the evenings from a health standpoint, highly asymmetric. 20 minutes, I do some reading in there every single night, so I get a bunch of reading done. It helps me sleep. I sleep much better at night. Plus, reduces all-cause mortality. It makes you live longer. It's like, okay, why wouldn't I do that investment on a daily basis? From a work standpoint, I would say the biggest thing for me over the last couple of years that has changed has been that I've realized that in the morning, I have like about 2 hours where I am highly creative. And if I do things that aren't creative during that window, I've effectively wasted this like golden period of time during my day. And so what I did was I started repositioning my entire morning routine so that I had actual work on creative projects during that window rather than spending that time on, whatever miscellaneous activities or going to the gym.
Yeah, I feel like that morning hour and time blocking in general is just super helpful for entrepreneurs or creatives. So yeah, structuring creativity and
structuring, and even more importantly than time blocking is understanding the types of energy you have at different times of the day, because not all energy is the same. Like you are going to have physical energy at certain times of the day, but you're going to have creative energy at different times of the day. You might be most creative at 10 at night. I'm most creative at 5 in the morning. And so for me to go work out at 5 in the morning is actually not a great move because that creative energy is perishable.
All right.
Later in the day, it's not going to exist for me. So I can go work out later in the day. I still have physical energy later in the day, but I don't have creative energy. And so actually matching what you are doing, if you're an entrepreneur and you have the luxury of doing this, matching what you are doing to the type of energy you have during that period of the day is a 10x activity for your life.
Yeah, completely agree. Takes a lot of experimenting to find that.
A lot of experimenting.
Sure. So one of the things you talk about in the book is the brain trust, right? Forming a personal board of advisors. And in the Bible, it says, in the multitude of counsel, there's wisdom. So can you go over the concept of how you form that brain trust and how you spoke about it in the book? I thought it was such an amazing way to do it.
Yeah, the idea of the brain trust is based on one single hot take, which is that networking is dead and mentorship is dead. Because networking and mentorship are based on flawed ideas. So networking is based on this idea that you can build transactional relationships that will provide a lot of value to you over the long run. That is flawed. What you're trying to do is actually build genuine relationships with people who are willing to help each other in both directions. Mentorship is flawed because it relies on the premise that a single person has all of the answers for you over the course of your life, and it requires a huge input of time from the other person. Like when someone comes and asks you to be their mentor, that feels like a pretty significant burden. It's like it's a pretty significant ask. So I have this idea of the personal board of advisors that you can collect a group of genuine relationships with people from different walks of life, different experience sets that can provide value to you in different ways. They have different lenses or perspectives on the things that you're facing in your life. And I think of building that as being about finding people that you connect with, that you feel value in the ideas or insights that they may have to offer on your journey. So maybe they are one step ahead of you, maybe they're 10 steps ahead of you, but they're at sort of different points and different perspective sets that can provide a unique lens on where you are on your journey.
Yeah, I like how you framed it, because like you said, it is a bit of a burden speaking, asking for mentorship and whatnot. And even having this brain trust mentally, so you don't actually have to go to them, but you think, what would Sahil do in this situation? I feel like that helps a lot for me.
Yeah, and it just is founded on the idea of like you're trying to build genuine relationships.
Yeah.
It's not transactional. You don't want to do this in a way where you're like, oh, okay, I want to get something from this person, so I'm going to go ask them for something. That never works because the people that you want advice from are used to people coming with their hands out to them. Like, I've talked about this in the past, but Tim Cook has been an incredible mentor and friend to me over my journey. And he probably on a daily basis has like 50 to 100 people that come into his life for the first time, and the first thing they do is come with their hand out asking for something. That is not a way to build a relationship with someone. That's never going to work if you come with your hand out. What you need to do is create value in some simple way over long periods of time to build a genuine connection and relationship with another person. If you do that, you will receive value in return. Create value, receive value. That's the golden rule in life, in relationships, in business, in all of these areas.
Yeah, completely agree. So
it's hot in here, by the way.
Hot. It's hot, I'm not gonna lie. There's this quote from Socrates that I was reminded of. It's like, the unexamined life is not worth living, right? But I wrote a piece on the other side. The over-examined life is not worth living. So my question to you is, do you find time for boredom often?
Yeah, I think that there's a very important and very fine line here between creating incremental improvements in your life and going too far towards over-optimization and frankly, like rumination. You just start thinking about problems too much in your life that you need to try to solve. There's this old, I think it's a Buddhist parable of a man that gets struck by a poisoned arrow. And as he's lying on the ground dying, someone's like, I'm gonna go get a doctor to save your life. And the man's like, hang on, wait. First, I need to understand where this arrow came from. What's it made out of? Like, what is the poison? Who shot it? Where did that person come from? And as he's asking all these questions, he dies. And the point is, like, you can spend all of this time spinning your wheels on answering all of these big questions, or you can just get the damn arrow out of your body, like solve the problem that is actually there. And I think in the social media age, there's a lot of focus on inputs. You get patted on the back on social media for your inputs. The reality, no one gives a shit about your deep work routine or your morning routine if your outputs aren't good. No one cares. And so at the end of the day, you may take pride in your inputs, but the world is going to judge you for your outputs. So if the outputs aren't good, you need to create an adjustment to the inputs in order to get there.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think so few people think about the output. They just pat themselves on the back, like you said.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm doing the right things.
Yeah, and like, look, growth mindset, right? Like the book, Carol Dweck Mindset. It's like one of the most famous books of the last 15, 20 years. Incredible book. And a seminal work in understanding how we think about who we are as people and the ability to change and be dynamic. But we've gone a little far in terms of the pendulum swinging, because there's a lot of people who will say like, well, I put in a lot of effort to this thing. You go get your job review and you get a bad review. You're like, but I put in a lot of effort. That's fine. I'm happy that you put in a lot of effort. But if the output wasn't good, then it doesn't matter. You need to adjust the inputs so that you can create the great output. You're not getting paid for your effort or your inputs. You're getting paid for your outputs in life.
For the value you create, right?
Exactly.
Dan Coe spoke about that recently. And actually on that topic of that book that you said you wrote about it recently, the narrative fallacy, and I made a video about it as well. And it's, in simple terms, we believe the stories that we tell ourselves. But I want to go one layer deeper with that. There's this quote from Cooley. I heard it from Jay Shetty once. That he said that I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. So it's this like perception thing, right? So the question is, do you think that what we think other people think about us also affects our narrative, like what we tell ourselves?
100%. I mean, the original story that you've told yourself from a young age ends up just persisting in your life. And those stories end up creating your reality. They dictate your thought patterns, they dictate your actions in the world, your behaviors. And they're very dangerous because if they're a negative story or if they're a self-limiting story, it will just continue to self-fulfill in your life. Because what you'll do, humans are very good. If you tell yourself you're not capable, you're not smart, I guarantee you will look around you and find tons of evidence to confirm that you're not smart and not capable. And you'll ignore every piece of evidence that would have refuted that idea. And so you have to constantly and create a process around questioning those stories that you tell yourself. Like on a monthly or quarterly basis, you need to sit down and zoom out enough, create some of the boredom, create some of the space to actually question some of those things that you think about yourself. Ask yourself whether they are actually real, whether there is real evidence to confirm them, and whether you're ignoring things that would break those stories.
What's the last thing that you asked yourself that you caught yourself out on?
I mean, this week, like I published this book into the world, and on Monday, so the book was released on Tuesday. On Monday, I walked into Times Square to see a billboard with my book and my face on it.
Yeah.
That night we had the first launch event, hundreds of people, sold out crowd, telling me, how excited they were about it, how great the stuff was. All of these like positive external things, giving me all the confidence in the world that I should feel great about this thing that I'm doing. I went home that night and I didn't sleep a minute. I was in the worst, panic, anxiety, stress, fear that I've experienced in my life. Wow. Didn't sleep. The whole night I was having dreams, thinking about, I'm going to release this thing into the world. This is when everyone's going to find out that I'm an imposter, that I'm a fraud. This is when it all comes crashing down, paranoia. The whole next day, it should have been joy, excitement. It was just completely caught in the grips of this feeling that this was when it was all going to end. And that was all grounded in this story that I've been telling myself since I was a kid, that I'm not that smart and that I'm not that good at these things. And I've been fooling people for a while, but this is the moment when it's really permanent and really public and it's out there in the world and I can't hide from it anymore and it comes crashing down. And I really struggled with it last week. Yeah. If I'm being completely honest, it was, my whole team around me was oh, aren't you happy? Are you feeling good? I was honestly not really. I was really not enjoying it. Yeah. And now I've gotten through it. I kind of worked through it. I had a process that I went through to try to navigate it. And I've been able to sort of rewrite that story a bit through some inner work around it. But the reality of these things is very different from what you see on the surface. And I think that's important for anyone out there to know that you are not alone when you feel those things. There's a tendency to think that the person that you admire or look up to has it all figured out, that things must be just great.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Sahil's publishing this book. That's like incredible, so cool. It was one of the worst days I've experienced mentally. Like I really was in a bad place. And on the surface, everything seems great.
Yeah.
And so you have to remember that the next time you're struggling with one of those moments, the next time you feel that imposter syndrome, you feel that fear of being found out, those things, that A, you're not alone, B, it's very overblown. Like no one actually is going to remember. No one's actually staring at you in the way that you think. Everyone's just worried about themselves. And then ultimately, C, it's like you are paying the cost of entry for the growth that you asked for. You asked for this growth. Well, that feeling of imposter syndrome is the cost of entry to achieve it. Yeah. So you have to pay it with pride if you're going to go after it.
I love how you put that. It's true. Like with Chris Will, I found some comfort in him saying as well, no one's thinking about you. Everyone's too busy thinking about themselves. And in the same way, like the way I saw a tweet, it was a banger. It was like, the way you tear your muscles, that's how you grow. So why would it be any different for your mind and your spirit? When you're writing this book, because you're saying it took 3 years to come together, I imagine that's quite a grueling process. There's times where, obviously I write as well, where sometimes nothing is happening, nothing's coming out, and I'm facing these blocks. But to the opposite side of that, what was it when you were writing, you felt full conviction in what certain topic or area that you've written in the book that stood out to you, made complete sense, and just flowed out of you in a way?
The prologue of the book is about my own personal experience with recognizing the finite, impermanent nature of time, and specifically how little time I had left with the people that I care about most in the world. There's this famous song by Guy Lombardo called "It's Later Than You Think." And that idea that it's later than you think in your life, that you don't have infinite time, that time is your most precious asset, that idea flowed out of me better than anything else because I had experienced it so clearly and viscerally in my own life.
Yeah, that really stuck with me, especially the part where you said you only see your parents 15 more times. That really hit me. And I commend you for making the move. Not a lot of people would do that, to go across the country. There's a founder of the Four Seasons Hotel said that excellence is your capacity to take pain. So what's your process of transmuting that pain into progress? Like, what do you do when you're sitting in the middle of it?
I learned this from a friend of mine, Alex Hormozi, who I had a long conversation with last week because as I was struggling with some of this stuff, and his idea is to have a coaching session with yourself. And it's a really interesting concept because what it forces you to do is fundamentally zoom out a bit on your life. What happens when you're experiencing those kind of feelings and those kind of pains is that you are so zoomed in and narrow in your perspective because you are the first player in your own video game. You're right here in the weeds. And the zoomed out perspective actually allows you to see the bigger picture and see the field of where you're going and what you're doing, the progress that you've made, all of these things that you can't see if you're just zoomed in right here. And so this idea of having a coaching session with yourself, I thought was really cool. So I set up an email thread and I emailed myself what I was experiencing to just get it down onto paper of here's what I'm struggling with. And then I had a back and forth conversation with myself, which sounds crazy, but was extremely helpful because it forced me to say okay, let me deconstruct. It was okay, deconstruct the problem for me. And then I respond and I'm thinking about okay, what is it actually that I'm worried about in this situation? What is the actual pain that I'm experiencing? Why am I so nervous? And then the response on the other side of okay, the zoomed out perspective is you're publishing a book. You're doing this thing that you've dreamed about doing. You've worked on it so hard for 3 years. All of these people follow you because you've created value for them for all of these years. And it provided so much comfort to me in that moment to just be able to see that bigger picture. And so I think that that's a really cool process of you could text yourself, you could, send yourself a voice note, whatever the thing is, allow yourself to be that kind of therapist in that moment because you actually already have those answers within you.
Completely.
You just haven't asked the right questions yet to uncover them.
I completely agree with that. I use voice memos and I go back and I listen to them and it gives me perspective on the problems I was facing at that time. You can go back 2 years and listen to the problems that you were facing and realize they weren't that big.
Yeah, you have to focus on trend line, not position. what happens when you are zoomed in on your own life is that all you see is your current position. And you see it and you compare it to everyone else's position on the board. And so you sit here and you're like, well, I'm not where I want to be because everyone that I see on social media is over here and I'm down here. But if you zoom out and you do that coaching session with yourself, you can see the trend, which is like, hey, I was here last year. Now I'm here. Man, my trend line is looking like I'm going to be shooting to the moon here.
Yeah.
And that is what actually matters.
Yeah.
It's the trend line, not the position.
Yeah, look at the years, not the months and the days, right? Do you want to know how to read 3 times faster than the average person? Well, it's a little known app called Shortform. Me and Sahil are both partnered with Shortform. It's an app that condenses books into one-page summaries in audio and text format. Here's what I'm currently reading on Shortform. Instead of waiting to find out if a book is actually good for you 300 pages in, why not use Shortform, read or listen to the one-page summary, get the key takeaways and the actual insights, and actually implement them into your life faster. If you use the first link in the description below, then you're going to get 20% off and a free trial. And by the way, if you don't know where to start with reading, then I have a free book list, 88 books that transform my life. You can get it completely for free and it'll be the second link in the description below. Download it and let me know in the comments what you end up reading. All right, let's get back to the show. So I'm 25. What are the 3 levers if you were 25 again that you would pull to maximize growth and most importantly, fulfillment?
Invest in your relationships is number 1. We don't think to invest in our relationships the same way we know to invest in our financial future. You know that if you put away $100 today into an investment fund, it's going to compound and grow in your life. Exact same principle applies to relationships. Investing in your relationships today compounds in your life. And actually is the single best financial move that you can make as well. Because investments in relationships are the things that are going to lead to cool business opportunities. My investments in relationships with people have been what have led to the coolest, most profitable businesses. It wasn't about identifying businesses. It was about the right people. And so I say this over and over again that like ultimately all of those journeys and destinations that you want in life financially and business-wise are going to be governed by the people that you choose to have in your space and in your energy. It's not going to be because you identify the best business idea. It's going to be because you're spending time with the right people, and those people are the ones that spark those ideas.
So it's positioning.
Yeah, it's positioning. It's like, look, everything in life is better with the right set of people around you. There's this common saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's actually not true. It's worse than that. You actually go to the lowest common denominator in your group. There's a scientific study. They put walking treadmills in this office space. And what happened was that people converged to the person who was walking the least. So if you have someone with really low expectations that is performing at a really low bar and they're in your circle and they're providing that energy to the circle, people actually start lowering to match that person. So you need to be very careful about the type of people that you allow into your space and energy because they actually determine your outcomes.
Cut them out. That's like Jordan. He talks about it in The Last Dance. He says, I'm not going to fall to your level. You know, you have to come up to mine if you want to play with me.
Yeah, and it's not always a great way to make friends, right? Like you're going to lose people over long periods of time. But as he said in that show, winning has a cost.
I wanted to ask you because you're similar to me in the sense that you have entrepreneurial background, you're an investor, so you think quite systematically, logically. And over the past year or so, I've been trying to lean more into my intuition and my curiosity. As Rick Rubin says that we can draw on our experience, for our wisdom, but it blocks our naivety and our curiosity. So do you draw on your intuition and how do you sort of strike that balance?
Yeah. My grandfather once told me, never let your head outsmart your gut. He used to say that the worst decisions in life are made when you allow your head to talk you into something when your gut already said no.
Wow.
And I have always taken that to heart, but I haven't always followed it as advice. I frequently allow my head to talk me into something when my gut already said no. A business or some opportunity where I'm like, this doesn't feel good, but I start the cycle of like, well, it could do this, and I talk myself into it, and it inevitably ends up going poorly. And so I have tried over the last year, 2 years to get better and better about actually listening to that inner voice a little bit more. And to the point earlier, I think it requires creating that boredom and creating that space.
Agreed.
Because normal standard in the modern era is to just be busy 24/7. And what you do when you create that is it's a constant loop of stimulus and response. You have everything coming in and then you're responding to it. New things coming in, responding, new things coming in, responding. So you never have time to actually think. You never actually pause to listen to the inner voice because you're just constantly in this loop. It's a treadmill, it's a hamster wheel. And so what you need to do is find ways to insert little bits of space into your life. It doesn't need to be like, oh, I'm going to just go wander around for 6 hours. Not all of us have that luxury. All it can be is like 5 minutes. I'm just going to take a 5-minute break between these two meetings. I'm going to go for a walk around the block without my phone. Or I'm going to go sit for 2 hours once a month and just zoom out on my life and think about these bigger picture questions. Doing that allows you to tune in to that inner voice that's running 24/7. It's why I have grown to love running as a practice, because it forces you to be in your head for a long period of time.
It's meditation, right?
Yeah, you can't be like sitting on social media. You can't be responding to emails. You can't be responding to texts. You just have to be, maybe you're listening to music, but you're just there. You're just sort of present in that moment.
Yeah, it's a form of meditation, I agree. And the problem is, like you said, because we're constantly on, I saw this idea that you're not really busy. It's just that you keep your calendar full to act as a hedge against the emptiness you'll feel, if you actually sat with yourself. I feel like a lot of people don't do that, take the time to sit with themselves,
Yeah, there's an interesting study done by this woman named Cassie Holmes, who wrote a book called Happier Hour. She's a UCLA professor. And the study was mapping happiness against the amount of free time that people have in their calendar. And what it found was that there was actually this like really interesting inverse U shape to it. So low levels of free time, very unhappy. High, crazy high levels of free time, also very unhappy. There was like a Goldilocks in the middle where you have some free time in your life, but not too much.
Yeah.
Because having too much means like maybe you're unemployed or you just have like, you're aimless. You don't know. Yeah, you're just in your head. You're thinking way too much. And having none means you feel stressed and constantly busy. And so there's this like middle ground of the little bit, which actually feels quite good. It allows you to zoom out, create that space without having way too much.
Yeah, and I think you have to find that balance for yourself as well, right? Some people, it might be 30 minutes a day. Some people might be 2 hours a day. It takes a lot of experimenting. So one of the topics that Naval speaks about is ask yourself what game you're playing. And I think it was Paul Graham that wrote, climbing down from a mountain that you conquered to climb an adjacent one takes a lot of courage. So how do you find out if the game that you're playing is even worth winning?
Yeah, I would say this is the most important meta concept in this book that I just put out, is very few of us ever take the time to ask the question whether the mountain we're climbing is one that we actually chose. Or is it one that we just defaulted into?
Yeah.
I would say that 99% of people just climb the default mountain that they've been told is the one that matters, and never took the time to ask the question if they actually want to climb that, if they actually care to be at the top of the mountain that they're currently climbing. And so if there's one thing you can do, it is just to pause and ask yourself that question. The answer might be, yes, I actually want to stay on this mountain. That's great. Or it could be, no, there's a slightly different mountain or adjacent one, maybe a very different one that I would prefer to climb. And that's a thing that you then can work through. But taking the time to ask that question is important because one very specific reason. We live in a speed-obsessed world. Everything is about going faster and faster and faster. It's running faster and faster, being more busy. All of these things are what the world values. They're like, oh yeah, go faster. Forbes 30 under 30. If you don't get that, you're never going to be successful. If you don't, make this much money by this age, if you don't get, raise this funding by this time, all of these things, it's all about speed. Get to that point as fast as possible. And when you run super fast, you lose sight of whether or not you actually care about the thing you're running towards. Life is so much more about direction than speed.
So true.
It's much better to climb slowly up the right mountain than it is to climb fast up the wrong one.
Right. It's so true. It happened to me. I was halfway up a mountain in a business that I didn't want to be in. But luckily I took the time to pause. And I feel like it's the same with you, with your career in investing before, and you made that switch in 2020, I believe, when you started writing. Do you believe in a creator, a higher power? What's your sort of belief system? Because I know you said you're not particularly religious, per se.
I'm not particularly religious, but I am spiritual, and I certainly believe in a higher power. I think it's very hard to have children and to look into your child's eyes and not believe that there is some higher power at work.
Yeah.
I would say that becoming a father made me more convinced of that fact than anything else in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't experienced it yet, but I feel like if anything's going to do it, would be that.
Yeah.
A light one. What brings you joy?
My son. It's related to that same point. I mean, my son brings me the most joy out of anything in my life. I can't really describe it. I spent the first 30 years of my life wondering what the meaning and purpose of all of this was. And then the day he was born and I held him in my arms, I felt like it was staring me back in the face.
Wow.
And I have felt that in some way, shape, or form on a daily basis ever since then.
Love that. Another thing that Naval talks about is desire. And it's desire, he said, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. So what's your process of balancing having ambition but not letting desire take the forefront of your life, and that's the only thing that drives you?
I think you can channel desire in great ways. Desire is not a bad thing. I actually think that Naval quote is a little bit off in my opinion, because desire channeled into things that you really care about is a great thing. I mean, I have a desire to build an incredible home and family and loving connection with my son or with my wife. That is a great pursuit and a great desire. Desire for more money, I think, is probably going to lead you off a cliff in certain ways. But desire for more purpose, to go build something meaningful, is a great thing. And I often think that it's very easy to blame time or energy when in reality you need to put your desire on blast. Because you make time and you create energy for the things that you truly care about. The things that you truly desire, you will make time and create energy for them. If you have a 6 a.m. flight to go on a vacation you're excited about, I guarantee you will get your ass out of bed at 3 a.m. to get to the airport and make that flight. But then that same person will say they don't have time or energy to wake up at 4 a.m. to go change their life. And the reality is they just don't want it bad enough to change their life in that moment. And that's fine. But you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I willing to do what's necessary in order to create the outcome that I claim that I want? And if the answer is no, that's a desire problem, not a time or energy problem.
Yeah, I mean, the angle I kind of thought about it from was in the Gita. You mentioned it in your book as well. Krishna speaks about this concept of this perpetual cycle of suffering you enter when you create desire. Desire creates attachment. Attachment creates anger. And then anger ultimately leads to delusion and destruction of wisdom. But the story I was reminded of when I saw that was in your book, when you talked about, or it might have been on a podcast, the person who knows when they have enough. Can you briefly just go over that? Because I thought it was such an amazing concept that I feel like a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah, I think the most beautiful articulation of this idea of enough is a story of a banker and a fisherman. So this banker goes down to a small fishing village and he's walking along the dock and he comes across this fishing boat. A man has caught a few fish. And he says, how long did it take you to catch those fish? And the fisherman says, only a little while. And the banker says, why didn't you fish for longer? And the fisherman responds, well, I have everything I need. In the morning, I fish for a little while, then I go home, I have lunch with my wife, then I take a nap, and then in the evening, I go into town, drink wine, play music, and laugh with my friends. And the banker's like, you got this all wrong. Here's what you need to do. You need to fish for longer so you can catch more fish. Then you use that money to buy a second boat. Then that boat makes a bunch of money. You buy a third boat, a fourth boat, a fifth boat. You create an enterprise of fishing boats. You move to the big city. You take the company public and you're going to make millions. And the fisherman says, and then what? And the banker's like, and then what? Then you can retire and move to a small fishing town. You can fish for a little while, and in the afternoon you can have lunch with your wife, take a nap, and then in the evening you can go into town and play music, drink wine, and laugh with your friends. And the fisherman just smiles and walks off into the distance. Yeah. And it's a story in the fact that the banker is trying to apply his map of reality to the fisherman's terrain, and they don't match. Right. The fisherman is already living his version of enough. He has enough. He has already found that enough life. The banker's definition of what that looks like is fundamentally different. The banker may want to go build something big. That may be his version of what enough looks like, but the two are different. We all need to define where we are on that spectrum between fisherman and banker. And it doesn't matter where you are. I'm not saying one is wrong and the other one is right. It's about defining what you care about, not defaulting into whatever the world tells you you should.
So you were a baseball player, along many lifetimes ago. So what transferable skills have you learned from baseball or professional athlete to be an athlete into business or into spirituality or into anything really?
I would say the number one thing that I learned from sports was resilience. The idea that you can never bet against the person who just keeps showing up. Never, ever bet against the person who is just willing to get back up, who is willing to take the punch and come back the next day and do it again. So few people are actually willing to do that. It's very trendy to say you're willing to do that, but can you do it again and again and again? Can you show up and do the action even when you have uncertain rewards? Right. I say that all the time. The most dangerous person in the world is the person who can continue to show up with discipline even when the rewards are uncertain. Yeah. Tolerance for uncertainty is the number one life hack.
Yeah, and it points to the idea of nothing for a long time, everything all at once. That's one universal truth I found to be true. Not sure if you've experienced the same thing, but how have you understood that idea? Is that generally true for you? Nothing for a long time, everything all at once?
I reject the idea that you have to turn off areas of your life in order to thrive in one. I think that traditional wisdom says that in order to really thrive in a single area, you have to shut off the light switch on the other areas of your life. I don't think that's true, and I think it's dangerous. What you need to do is recognize that all of these areas of your life exist on dimmer switches. Right. And you can have one turned way up, and you should, but the other ones can just be turned on low. You can still do the one tiny daily action to make sure that ball is moving forward in those areas, with the idea being anything above zero compounds in your life. Anything above zero compounds. What you can't do is have it at zero. But doing a 15-minute walk is better than doing nothing. That's going to stack positive wins in your health. Sending the one text to the friend when you're thinking about them is going to stack a positive win in your relationships over time. So don't have it turned off, just have it turned low. Anything above zero compounds.
And it's recognizing what season you're in to know which ones you're going to dim, which ones you're going to put to the top, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's transition.
Yeah, it's hot. It's hot, man. It's like a real hot sauna.
All right, thank you so much, Sahil, for coming onto the show. Really appreciate your insights and the time that you've taken out to speak to us and share your ideas. Anyone that's not on his newsletter, please go subscribe. 5 Types of Wealth is now out everywhere, and I believe it's a bestseller as well, so congratulations. And look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, man. That's all good. Oh.
How was it?
You know what? It wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Once you get into it. The funny thing about co-founders